Hey, what's up guys? It is Dark Rain Albion here, and today I want to cover a super important thing for PvP in Albion, something that has changed my PvP lately, changed how I'm taking fights, changed just how I'm playing my PvP, right? I'm ever learning. I would never say I know everything, and I would say this is something recently that has helped me the most, and we're going to talk about it, then I'm going to try to go do it. Instead of showcasing it, we're going to queue up some arena and talk about this same concept in play there. And this is a little bit of an advanced concept, not so much the idea of it, but how we utilize it in fights, and that is going to be the front-loaded damage that we have through our higher cooldown abilities and how that relates to whether we should be brawling or kiting, as well as when I should be using my defensives. Now, that was a lot of words to explain something that is fairly simple, but my W and my E deal a lot of damage, but they can't do it all the time. So what should I be doing when they're on cooldown? What should I be doing when they're off cooldown, right? It's very simple. So if I go over to this dummy, I auto attack and I kill it. I auto attack and I kill it. Auto attack and I kill it. Good. That was a pretty long time of doing that. And I did 2,000 damage, 2,036 damage. If I come over here, I auto attack, W, I E, I Q. We passed that. We passed it by like 25%. So it's clear, and I know you guys are like, grumble. Obviously, we know this. Like, yeah, for sure, right? Our W and our E deal a lot of our damage. That makes sense, but what's the point? Whenever my abilities are on cooldown, every second that they are getting closer to their cooldown is better for me than for my opponent. If, let's say, I am in a fight and I initiate, I Q, I W, I auto attack, I E, if I can kite and not fight while my abilities are refreshing their cooldowns while my opponent's abilities are still on cooldown, that is good for me, right? Every second that RE, right? RE is a 15-second cooldown and deals 1,000 damage. That means that we're dealing like, what? Every second that it's coming up is an amount of damage, let's say. That amount of damage can be redeemed once it's off cooldown, right? If I die when my dual swords is 1 second from coming up and that spinning blades attack would be what ended the fight, then I needed to play in a way where I could have done that. Now, very easy to say that, but playing this dual sword build has really shifted my mindset about it because of the way that my W and my E interact with Stalkerhood, right? I'm playing almost like an execute build. So my goal is to use my first E into Stalkerhood. And I have to play differently if I have to do that in a different sequence than that. So if I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to use my first E and then I plan on using it right away, then I need to play differently than if I wasn't going to use it right away. If I use it right away, I pretty much know I'm going to have to use this during the Stalkerhood uptime to kill someone. So if I use it right away, that means this fight's going to last a minimum of 15 seconds for it to be back up, as well as that means that I'm going to be able to use Blade Cyclone twice as well. So with an idea of how this fight is going to go. And of course, this is like inspect someone, check the IP difference. What am I going to have to do? If the person's 200 IP below me, I'm going to dash, I'm going to Blade Cyclone, right? I'm going to Q, I'm going to W, right? 1300 damage. Then I'm going to Stalkerhood into the E, and that's going to be plenty. But the problem is if people are higher IP or you're punching up in IP a lot, then you need to know when it's time to kite or when it's time to brawl and fight this person, and that a lot relates to our cooldowns. If I said 100% of the uptime you have fighting someone is when your Frost Shield is up, which our Frost Shield is a reflect and a damage resist, that is so good for us because it means that we are getting such good use of our spells, right? The worst is when you Frost Shield and someone sprints away and then they catch you again, right? A lot of the strength of Bloodletter is deciding when these cooldowns are up or down and when they are interacting with each other. If you're playing Bloodletter, you have maxed out mobility. So when the person uses their chest piece, you get away. You can go in, you can poison pot, you can use your Bloodletter execute, you can use something like Chain Slash on that person, and then you can run away until those are back up, but staying in that mid distance where they can't mount or get away. And Bloodletter is very, very similar in the same way that grab a Bloodletter. forget that they're not up there anymore. It used to be the flat 4 that you could click on. But Bloodletter has lunging stabs where it is an execute, but it is a 35-second cooldown. So it's much more extreme in the case of Bloodletter to blow your E right away, but it's safe to do with how Bloodletter is currently played in the meta with a high mobility set, maybe even a Hellion jacket, right, to regen off of mobs while staying in that midpoint range. So Bloodletter's strength is being able to choose when it is brawling, right? If my opponent uses Inferno Shield right now, right before I'm about to engage, right before I'm about to Assassin's Shoes, and they go in and use Inferno Shield, I have no reason to go in. I'm just going to like stay in that mid range where I'm not quite disengaged, but they can't brawl me or fight me, right? They're going to have to commit mobility, which if someone commits mobility to catching you, that's why people dismounting you is really good a lot of the time for a fight, because if we have sprint and they don't, we have immediately changed the fight into we have the choice of when to fight them, and they don't have the choice of when to fight us because they can't be mobile enough to decide those things. So whenever I'm going in, I'm thinking all my abilities are on cooldown or ready to be used, right? Off cooldown, right? I'm not going in, right? If my spells look like this and there's a dude running at me, I'm going to walk away, at least for a little bit until my spells are closer to being finished. So that idea is, right, it's something to think about, but putting it into practice can be a little difficult. But I think it really shines with what I am currently playing, this dual swords build, because this is not only very reactive because we have mage robes, which is a very solid purge, and of course it can be purged off by helmets, but usually you can get it to purge off the chest piece. So the reason that a purge is so good is it's another way to negate that ability to brawl, right? It's going to be very difficult to just hit someone into Inferno Shield. And it's especially difficult if we get into our next step of utilizing our cooldowns at the correct time. If I'm using spinning blades into someone's chest piece, let's say Frost Shield, for example, the amount of damage that it is going to do is going to be drastically different, as well as some of that damage is going to be reflected on me, and I'm going to be slowed for an almost 4 seconds with this mage robe. So it is so difficult to just brawl, and win the fight, right? There's going to be times where you're fight. That's like all of the good mist weapons have that ability. Bear Paws, Death Givers, Frost Staff, the Flamewalker Staff. The reason that those mobile builds are good is, of course, because you're in big sets usually playing those and you want to be able to get people, but it's also because when you're mobile, you are choosing when to fight. It's like if you had to stand there and absolutely tank a solo dagger E, if you just had to stand there and tank it, it's like, okay, I'm going to lose that fight. Like I understand that Bloodthirsty Blade is really strong, so I know that when Bloodthirsty Blade comes up, my next goal in the fight is going to be, okay, how do I not engage or interact with Bloodthirsty Blade until it's over? Because I'm always going to be better off engaging into a solo dagger without their E than with it, because the option isn't there for them. The move speed, the steal, the big damage, it isn't there. And so when the core identity of a weapon, and like solo dagger, like Death Givers, when the E is off cooldown, you need to be scared. And when it's on cooldown, you need to be fighting and brawling and going crazy. Like whenever I fight Bear Paws guys in really small sets and they try to gank me, the reason that I can do that is because usually I'm mounted. Usually they use their E to dismount me. And then now we're going into a fight where you have a significant disadvantage because of the way that your damage works, right? If we look at Bear Paws as just our example, and let's look at a tier 8 so we can get a more reasonable idea of how impactful this can be. This is going to deal 1,021 physical damage and restore 15% of the damage you deal as health. So that's a lot. That's a lot of a differential, and it's mobility. So that is putting like, let's say 1,171 HP, 1,706. So it's like I'm starting that fight with 1,100 more HP due to the fact that their E is on cooldown. And not necessarily that they won't use it, but that time that they used it, the value of them using it has been dissipated. It's, once again, the same reason why purges are so good is because you can almost negate their chest piece value, which is worth something because you get to decide when to use your cooldowns into it. Okay, hopping right into it. Here's what we got going on. I am currently harassing a carving sword guy in a camp to talk to me. He keeps trying to get me, and I keep saying hey, and I forgot what I was going to ask him, but it was probably mean because he's playing 7.3 carving sword. But we end up fighting a pretty straight up bigger dual swords guy, and 6.2 compared to 5.1 is 2 tiers up, so that is usually enough to be a noticeable difference. Like, you could play worse and still win. And the reason that we got this weird, awkward angle going on is to not let you guys see the cooldowns, because I want you guys to think about it in your head, like if I was your opponent, right? Think about, okay, what is the state of this fight, not just from an HP differential, but from what resources do both players have available to them, and how are they going to use them in a good way. I'm using the build that I just showed, which will give you guys a little bit of a hint of what's going to go on here, but there's a point in this fight, and I will say, there it is. It is right about here, where it's like, okay, you lost, right? The person's at 70% HP, you're at 20%, but I've clearly saved some things, pop him into Stalker Hood, and he pops there. And so the fight isn't as cut and dry as it looks, right? There's a lot more going to it than just HP differences. I am going absolutely insane chasing this guy. He dismounted and then ran away, and then ran like forever, and he didn't have a sprint, and I was like, am I going to sprint into his swords? Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I'm just trying to keep him in combat so that when the mobs are hurting him, his HP isn't just regenning back up. But he used dash on his boots, so I just thought, like, I'll eventually get this guy. Like, I don't got to be too concerned about it. But what's important here is we just had talked about building stacks on your E versus just having an E that deals damage, and he does something where he uses ability so inefficiently that I just win the fight. So I get the flame artillery on him, I get 2 charges off, I get value, but his E claymore stun just doesn't do enough for him. And now this fight looks close, but look, he Stalker Hoods with no follow-up, and he didn't save, he didn't consider that he needed something with the Stalker, and the fight just ends. He's left there with nothing to do. So in a fight like that, I understand that the E is on cooldown. So when that Stalker Hood comes, I'm not like, whoa, I gotta run away. I'm like, okay, what are you gonna do? Realistically, what ability comes next from this Stalker Hood that can kill me? And it was nothing. And right there, knowing the cooldowns just instantly won me the fight there. And I end up going back to that camp, and absolutely nothing happened, so don't worry, fellas. Okay, so this is Bear Paws guy. Actually do pretty well against Bear Paws, and the IP's kind of close, so this is fine. What I do want to show, though, is this guy's going to utilize what we just talked about against me, or attempt to, and I'm going to be kind of on a timer. And it starts when we break contact here, and he has adrenaline boost, which means he's faster than me. As you can see, everything's on cooldown. I have no way to catch him. His E is going to heal him, and I have no way to reflect. So if he gets away for long enough, he eventually can use his ability, heal, and then win, even though the fight is so in my favor. Because I had nothing, I truly didn't have any resources. Now, this is just a really, really good fight, because I am going to use my abilities in a way to counteract his abilities flat out, right? Understanding the cooldowns here, I'm saving the E, right? I get him out there, that's his chest piece, and then I spin him out of his cape. I had an idea of what the fight was going to play out as. I knew there was going to be 2 forms of invis. I knew that the latter invis, Undead Cape, was going to be used in a way where he was going to be low enough for me to, let's say, spin dead or E dead, right? My W or my E. They're both AoE non-targetable. So the Stalker Hood's going to take care of one. The abilities on my sword is going to take care of the other. So I had the foresight to be like, okay, this is most likely how this fight's going to play out. This is good. Martin does great. He is a lot bigger than me, a lot more IP than me, but he has a couple different things that are going on, and so it's hard to decide what to mage robe, and it's hard to decide when to use my cooldowns because he is in such a bigger set than me. I thought he was AFK. I was there for a little bit, and I was like, am I going to dismount this guy? But I was just chill. And so he gigs, right? I recognize the gig is probably not a good time to E, right? There's no reason to use my abilities into his reduction. he is doing the correct thing right here. He is spacing with stuff on cooldown. Then he comes back in, uses a defensive while brawling, and then uses another ability while brawling. Now the problem is he lets himself get too close to dead, and then I can just kind of power through with Stalker. I've seen it in a few different contexts and uses. I'm going to try to condense everything that we've talked about into a short little explanation about how you should be using this and utilizing it in your fights and making you a better PvPer because of it. So, our abilities have cooldowns. When they're off cooldown, we don't want to fight. When they're on cooldown, we want to use them as quick as possible in most cases. Now, there is certain things that want to save their cooldowns, like let's say for a bow, for example. They want to save their mobility because they want to use their mobility after a sprint, right? For the duration of sprint, all mobility is kind of null from a bow. I'm talking frost shot in the queue because the person's still going to be able to stay on you. So doing something like blasting all your mobility and they catch up to you is not good. So you want to space those out, and that is just one unique situation. And Albion PvP is really hard to say this is the end all be all, here's how to be good. But this is something that should be on your mind, especially with different builds too. There is some builds that the E, or the main spell of your weapon, requires stacks or doesn't require stacks, and that is really important. Like Warbow, for example. Warbow is very good, very awesome. And the E doesn't need anything to deal the damage. It doesn't need stacks. It doesn't need anything. So a lot of Warbow is hitting you with magic arrow without fighting you, right? If a Warbow could endlessly keep you at 26 meters of range and hit you with the E, they would, because they don't need to be close to deal damage. Now, something like a dual dagger pair. They require stacks, which doesn't necessarily mean they have to fight you in the specific case of dual daggers, but they have a timer on when their E becomes useful. It's not just all of a sudden useful, right? It's not like they can just throw it out there like something like Demon Fang where it doesn't matter, right? Demon Fang just does its thing. Totally does its thing. Death Giver's a really important case of this because if they have 3 stacks, or 3 stacks either way is what I meant to say, like Sunder Armor or Assassin Spirit. If they have 3 stacks, it doesn't, like, they don't even use the spell. That's how much the brawl is important to them. And so keeping in mind all of this, you want to not only be aware of your cooldowns, but also your opponent's cooldowns. If I'm going to use my W and my E, I want to try to get my opponent to use their chest piece first. If I'm going to go in on my opponent and their chest piece is up, I just want to be aware. I don't want to dump everything, right? If I go W and they don't chest piece, and then I go E and they don't chest piece, it's really good. But sometimes, right, when someone dashes in on you with assassin shoes especially, it can be like, oh, like the big damage is coming and they'll reactively hit frost armor, right? Like they dash, right? And then this person hits frost armor. And then if you're just like on autopilot casting all your spells, that's going to be 1900 damage that's going to get reduced and reflected back to you, which is not what you want to happen. Now, we have to talk about how our abilities work together as well, and having Stalkerhood up, or the debuff up, makes my abilities way more valuable, so I'm okay with sitting on the cooldown, right? I'm comfortable with sitting on the cooldown because once that Stalkerhood's up, I know that the Spinning Blade's most likely going to kill, regardless of even like IP, like it's going to clap, like it's going to go crazy. And so there's no reason to overthink the spinning blades or the Q or the W or the E, right? Just use our spells together. Use our spells at a time where our opponent isn't actively reducing our damage, and then be aware of our opponent's spells that can stop us from dealing damage and their spells that can deal damage to us, right? It's not like I just go try to hit my buttons better than my opponent in Albion. It's not like that. It can't be because of how powerful the abilities are. If someone E, Q, W, and then gets away, and then like we're gonna have to re-engage, and I didn't cast any of my spells, and they just absolutely blasted me, like that is gonna be such a hard fight to win. Like almost impossible if you're equal IP and someone gets all their stuff on you and then they get away. So keeping the strength of your build too is really important. If you're someone who needs to brawl, then you need to be mobile, right? You can't afford to not be mobile. If you're someone who needs to kite, it's the same thing. You need to be mobile. Now, if you're a weapon that has high mobility on it, then I don't really need to be mobile in my other ways, right? So you see the kind of opposite of that in different cases. You'll see assassin shoes with something like Death Givers because those pairs of mobility pair well together, right? The Q and the W, the little dash, and the other two dashes on Death Givers because it actually has three ways of mobility if it goes chain slash or dash with the E. That functions really well with not necessarily a sprint, but just little spurts of movement like the assassin shoes have. Now, if your build is like solo dagger, where you're going to need to be mobile for a period of time, a specific period of time, then something like a sprint is much better for you, or even having an ability to stop your opponent from being mobile is much more important because there's like a time period where it's like, okay, I need to make this work right now. That's like we saw the Heretic, Demon Helm, Adjudicator Boots build with Solo Dagger with the what is it called? The Leering Cane with the Leering Cane just to keep people still to hit them with the E on Solo Dagger, and that works pretty good. So keeping in mind that people are going to try to lock you down too if you kite, this also will help you learn what you work well against and what you shouldn't fight against, right? Understanding how someone's build comes together or what their idea of what they're going to do to you is, right? Like my idea with my build I have is pretty simple. I'm going to dash, I'm going to Q, I'm going to W, I'm going to brawl you, I'm going to be spamming my Q. I'm going to go in for Frost Shield when you're doing your big damage, and I'm going to save my E in hopes of casting that into Mortal Agony or the Stalker. Now, that works great. But if I was Warbow, I would know, okay, I don't need to get him, like, my damage is going to be consistent through. Like, I don't need to save something for a Stalkerhood. So I'm going to be using, let's say, Ray of Light and the E on Warbow. I'm going to be putting those two together constantly without saving anything because they don't have synergy with the rest of my kit. Now, if I'm something like Frost Shot, maybe I'll save that for when the person gets on me, or maybe I'll be continuously using it against a person who doesn't have very much mobility. And these ideas, it's what's going to get you fighting correctly and taking good fights. Not only taking good fights, but performing well in fights where your understanding is better than your opponent's, right? As soon as you can start to use your spells correctly, understand what is happening, what this fight is probably going to look like, then you have a good understanding. Like, if a Death Giver's guy gets 3 Sunders on me, I know that the damage is coming, right? I have no doubts that the damage is coming. So I'm waiting till 3 Sunders comes up or 3 Assassin Spirit charges to then use my chess piece, my gig pot, something like that, to negate that damage because I have understood how the fight is going to go, right? I've foreseen how this weapon plays. Now, this isn't going to work every time, right? You're going to get 3 stacks, the dude's never going to cast E, and then you're going to be like, oh my gosh. And that's hard to stop, right? Like, people play different, but if you can, the majority of the time, play better or understand the matchup better than your opponent, you are the majority of the time going to have an advantage, which means the majority of the time you are going to win. So, a little bit of a longer video, a little bit of a yap video here. Not doing much, just talking. And I think it's important. This is really important. If you guys have any questions, I'm hoping to make a few more videos like this about concepts that are really important. I know I said earlier in the video I would do some 1v1 arena, but 1v1 arena gone, which is so sad. So no more 1v1 arena, but it'll be all right, guys. We'll pull through. And thanks for watching so much, guys. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate being able to share what has been not only improving in my Albion PVP, but what I'm starting to realize is more important, as well as kind of talking to people in the comments, because like I said, I'm by no means a professional. I am profitable. I win the vast majority of my 1v1 fights, and I think that's good. I think that's really all you can hope for. And so I'm still definitely learning. I could still be getting better. And so leave a comment if you guys are like, yo, dude, you're completely wrong, and here's why. It's much more important to me to be good at Albion than to be correct or to act like I know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to get in a set and go fight people and use my cooldowns and not let them use theirs. You guys should do the same. Have a good one.